Good night, this is Fumi Sleepy Time Stories. Tonight's bedtime story is about to begin.
Once upon a time, there was a king and a queen. They had been married for many years, but they were deeply troubled because they had no children. One day, as the queen was strolling by the river, a little shrimp emerged from the water and said to her, "Your wish will soon come true. Before long, you will give birth to a baby." After some time, the little shrimp's prophecy came true. The queen gave birth to a very beautiful baby girl. The king was overjoyed and decided to hold a grand banquet to celebrate the birth of the princess. He not only invited friends, family, and foreign guests, but also all the witches in the kingdom, so that they could bestow their blessings upon his daughter. There were 13 witches in his kingdom, but he only had 12 golden plates for them. So he invited only 12 witches. As the grand banquet came to an end, the guests took turns presenting the little princess with the finest gifts and blessings. She received beautiful clothes and jewelry, precious and rare gems and diamonds, and exotic flowers and plants from faraway lands. The witches also gave her their blessings. One bestowed virtue upon her, another granted her beauty, and yet another gifted her with happiness. They gave her all the qualities and hopes that people could wish for in the world. Just as the 11th witch had finished giving her blessing, the 13th witch, the one who had not been invited, suddenly stormed in. She was furious about being left out and felt that she had been shunned by the kingdom. Seeking revenge, she prepared to cast her wicked curse. She entered the hall and shouted, "King, your daughter shall, on her 16th birthday, prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and die." With that, she let out a wicked laugh and left. Everyone in the hall was horrified. The king was both shocked and enraged, while the queen nearly fainted from despair. Fortunately, the 12th, which had yet to bestow her gift, she stepped forward and said, "The evil curse will indeed come true, but my blessing will protect the princess. She will not die. Instead, she will fall into a deep sleep and slumber for 100 years." To protect his daughter from harm, the king ordered that all the spinning wheels in the kingdom be collected and burned. As time passed, the witch's blessings manifested in the princess. She was intelligent, beautiful, gentle, and graceful. She carried herself with elegance and charm, and everyone adored her. On her 16th birthday, the king and queen were busy preparing a grand celebration for her. Left alone, the princess felt a bit bored and began exploring the palace. She wandered through every room until she finally arrived at an ancient tower. She thought to herself, "How have I never known about this fascinating place before?" Inside the tower, there was a narrow staircase leading upwards. She climbed the stairs and found a door at the top, with a golden key already in the lock. Curious, the princess turned the key, and the door creaked open. Inside, an old woman was sitting there. The princess greeted her. "Hello, Granny. May I ask what you were doing?" "I'm spinning thread," the old woman replied, before turning her attention back to her work. "This little thing looks so interesting," the princess exclaimed. She stepped forward to examine the spindle, but as soon as she touched its sharp tip, she collapsed onto the floor. Unconscious, the 13th witch's curse had come true. In reality, the old woman was the 13th witch in disguise. She knew that every spinning wheel in the kingdom had been destroyed, so she decided to ensure that the curse would be fulfilled herself. However, the princess did not die as she had intended. Instead, she fell into a deep slumber. The king and queen, upon discovering their sleeping daughter, were both heartbroken and worried. They hurried to bring her back to her room, but the moment they left her chamber, they too fell into a deep sleep. The horses in the stables, the dogs in the courtyard, the pigeons on the roof, and even the flies on the walls, all fell asleep as well. Even the fire in the hearth quietly extinguished. Everything seemed to freeze in time, as if the entire palace had been placed under an enchantment, sinking into an endless slumber alongside the princess. Soon, thorny vines began growing around the palace, forming towering walls. Day by day, year by year, the vines grew taller and denser, eventually covering the entire palace, concealing even the rooftops and chimneys. And so, a legend began to spread throughout the kingdom, a tale of a beautiful princess who lay in an enchanted sleep. Known as the Sleeping Rose, the princess that people whispered about was none other than the king's own daughter. From that time on, many princes from different lands came to seek the princess, hoping to behold her beauty. They bravely fought through the thorny vines, trying to reach the palace. But none succeeded. Some were ensnared by the vines, while others tripped over the roots, as if invisible hands were pulling them back. None of them ever managed to escape from the thorny maze. Many years passed. One day, a young and handsome prince set foot on this land. An old man by the roadside told him the tale of the thorned palace, describing a magnificent castle hidden within the thick vines. Inside, there lay a fairy-like princess named Rose. She had been cursed by a witch, and the entire palace had been asleep with her for nearly 100 years. The old man also recounted how his grandfather had spoken of many princes who had attempted to pass through the thorns but had never returned. After hearing this, the young prince declared, "No story will frighten me. I must see Princess Rose for myself." The old man warned him against taking such a risk, but the prince had already made up his mind. On that very day, exactly 100 years had passed. When the prince arrived at the thorny barrier, he saw that the vines were now covered with beautiful blooming flowers, mostly roses, as if they were welcoming him. With surprising ease, he passed through the vines, and as he walked forward, the thorns behind him closed up again, as if no one but him was meant to enter. At last, he reached the palace and saw that everything inside was still. Dogs lay asleep in the courtyard, horses slept in the stables, and pigeons rested with their heads tucked beneath their wings. Inside the palace, the flies on the walls were motionless, the king and queen slumbered on their thrones, and the kitchen workers stood frozen in place, their tasks left unfinished. Even the fire in the hearth had paused in time. As he ventured deeper inside, silence filled the air, so profound that he could hear even the faintest sound. Finally, he reached the princess's chamber. Pushing the door open, he stepped into the room where Princess Rose lay in a deep sleep upon a soft bed. Her golden hair cascaded over the pillow, making her fair face appear even more radiant. Her rosy cheeks and soft lips made it impossible to believe that she had been asleep for 100 years. The prince had never seen such a beautiful girl. He stared at her, unable to look away. Then, unable to resist, he leaned down and gently kissed her lips. With that soft kiss, Princess Rose slowly awakened from her deep slumber. Her eyelashes fluttered before she opened her eyes, and as if she had been waiting for the prince, she smiled radiantly at him. The prince was utterly captivated by her beauty. He held her close and led her out of the room. At that very moment, the king and queen also awakened. Along with everyone else in the palace, they looked around in confusion, unsure of what had happened, but soon burst into laughter at one another's bewildered expressions. The horses stood up, stomping their hooves. The dogs leaped and barked joyfully. The pigeons lifted their heads and flapped their wings, soaring into the sky. The flies on the walls buzzed and flew away. The fire in the hearth blazed once more. The chefs and maids resumed their tasks, and the palace was once again filled with life and laughter. Soon after, the prince and Princess Rose held a grand wedding, and they lived happily ever after.